Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a terrifying figure who hid behind many names: Jeff Davis, Jack Allen, Teddy Bedard. Behind these aliases was a man history has largely forgotten. A man who escaped from behind bars not once or twice, but 9 times, spreading so much fear in the criminal world that his story is hard to hear. This was no ordinary criminal. Historians and crime experts today count him among America's most dangerous and brutal serial killers. A man who left nothing but violence and death wherever he went, showing no remorse. What drove him to such cruelty and violence? How did he repeatedly slip through the law's grasp? And what sets him apart from other serial killers? This is the story of Carl Panzram. Hello, I'm Raven, and you're watching Raven Crime Files. If you enjoy fascinating crime and investigation stories from around the world, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoy it, and hit the bell icon so you get notified as soon as a new video drops. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your love and support. Now, let's dive into the story. Charles Carl Panzram was born on June 28, 1891, in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, USA. His parents, John and Matilda Panzram, were immigrants from East Prussia, Germany. When Carl was young, his father, John, abandoned the family, leaving Matilda to toil alone in the fields with Carl and his 4 siblings. At just 8 years old, Carl was brought before a court for being drunk. By age 12, he stole food and a revolver from a neighbor's house, landing him in court again. His parents sent him to the Minnesota State Training School, which was supposed to be a reform school but was more like a harsh prison. There, Carl endured brutal abuse, beatings, starvation, and possibly sexual assault. Some believe he committed his first murder there, though this has never been confirmed. Life at the training school only worsened for Carl. He was beaten by other children and tortured by the staff, some of whom allegedly raped him. These experiences fueled a deep rage inside him. One day, in a fit of anger, he set fire to the school's building, his first recorded crime. When questioned, Carl spun a false story, and astonishingly, the authorities believed him and let him go. He returned home and went back to school, but his criminal mindset remained unchanged. Once, he even threatened to kill his teacher in front of the entire class, pulling out a gun, which slipped from his pocket. The teacher cleverly threw the gun away, thwarting his plan. After this failed murder attempt, Carl decided to flee, disappearing into what would become a dark new chapter of his life. Wandering along train tracks, Carl was writing the darkest chapter of his existence. Each day brought new hardships. Homeless and riding trains, he was repeatedly assaulted by strangers. When he reported this to the railway police, they not only refused to help but beat him mercilessly. This was when Carl learned a harsh lesson: the world had no place for the weak, only treating them like animals. Everyone seemed determined to break him, whether strangers or law enforcement. As time passed, Carl was arrested for theft and sent to a juvenile prison. In 1907, he teamed up with another inmate, Jimmy Benson, to escape and head west. Together, they robbed churches and set them ablaze. In his writings, Carl described these acts as an old hobby, rooted in his deep hatred for religion, which stemmed from his childhood in Minnesota, where religion was forced upon him. That same year, while drunk and wandering in Montana, Carl was drafted into the U.S. Army. But this was just a brief chapter, as he was soon arrested for theft and other crimes. He served 2 years in the strict Fort Leavenworth prison. After his release, the Army dishonorably discharged him. Carl returned to a life of theft, robbery, and wandering. He was imprisoned multiple times, using different aliases in each jail. Prison guards despised him because he often defied them and attacked them, leading to brutal punishments: solitary confinement, starvation, or being bound hand and foot. There were only a few periods when Carl didn't commit crimes, once when he worked as a strikebreaker, and another when he tried to get a job as a steward on a U.S. Army ship, only to be fired due to his drinking problem. These moments show that a normal life was nearly impossible for Carl, whether in or out of prison. Carl saw himself as the embodiment of rage. Standing 6 feet tall and weighing 200 pounds, he attributed his physique to years of labor and prison hardship. He took pleasure in intimidating others, breaking things, and setting fires. Most disturbingly, he raped the men he robbed as a way to dominate them. On June 1, 1915, he committed a robbery in Oregon but was caught while trying to sell the stolen goods. He was sentenced to 7 years in a prison run by a notoriously strict warden, Harry Minto, who beat prisoners and locked them in dark cells. For a dangerous inmate like Carl, the torture was even worse. Defiant, Carl vowed he'd never serve his full sentence. Within his first year, he and another inmate, Otto Hooker, escaped. During the breakout, Otto killed Warden Minto, making Carl an accomplice to murder. After being recaptured, Carl faced various punishments, including 61 days in solitary confinement. 2 years later, on September 18, 1917, he tried to escape again, engaging in 2 shootouts with police and wounding an officer before being caught. His sentence was extended. On May 12, 1918, Carl sawed through his cell bars and escaped once more. He shaved his mustache, assumed the alias John O'Leary, and resumed his violent crimes. In 1920, Carl broke into the home of former U.S. President William Howard Taft in New Haven, Connecticut. He wanted revenge because Taft, as Secretary of War, had approved Carl's earlier prison sentence at Fort Leavenworth. Carl stole a large amount of money, jewelry, and Taft's .45 caliber Colt pistol. With the stolen money, he bought a luxurious yacht named Akista in New York City, docking it at South Street Seaport. There, he began a killing spree. He'd befriend men at local bars, invite them to his yacht for drinks, then rob, rape, and murder them, dumping their bodies near the Execution Rocks Lighthouse in Long Island Sound. This rampage lasted a year, claiming 10 lives. Eventually, his yacht ran aground and sank near Atlantic City, New Jersey, allowing his last 2 victims to escape. Carl wandered, engaged in shootouts with police, and eventually fled to Africa, landing in Luanda, Portuguese-occupied Angola. There, he worked as a foreman for the Sinclair Oil Company. One day, he saw an 11 or 12-year-old boy near an oil rig. Carl lured him to a ditch, raped him, and brutally killed him. He didn't stop there. He took 6 men on a hired boat under the pretense of crocodile watching near Lobito Bay, shot them one by one, and threw their bodies to the crocodiles. In 1922, Carl returned to the U.S., planning to replace his sunken yacht with a new one. For the next year, he dealt drugs and roamed the East Coast. On July 18, he arrived in Salem, Massachusetts, where he targeted 12-year-old George Henry McMahon. Luring him with money, Carl took him to a secluded area, repeatedly raped him, stuffed newspaper in his mouth to silence him, and beat him to death, hiding the body under tree branches. It was found 3 days later. Carl then stole another boat, painted it to resemble his old yacht Akista, and spent the next year roaming the Hudson River like a pirate. On June 27, 1923, while trying to sell his boat, Carl shot a man in the head, later claiming the man tried to rob him. Arrested for this crime, Carl tricked his lawyer by using stolen goods to pay for bail. Once released, he fled to Connecticut, where he claimed to have raped and killed an unknown boy in New Haven. In August, he brutally murdered 14-year-old Alexander Lozak in Philadelphia before escaping to New York. On August 23, using the alias John O'Leary, he attempted a theft at the Larchmont train depot but was caught. In jail, he confessed to being a wanted fugitive who shot a police officer in Oregon, but the police didn't believe him. To reduce his sentence, he pleaded guilty, but the court showed no mercy, sending him to the harsh Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora for 5 years. Until his release in 1928, Carl was tortured by guards. In retaliation, he attacked other inmates, tried to kill a guard, plotted to set fire to a workshop, and was badly injured during an escape attempt, receiving no medical treatment. On July 26, after his release, he went to Philadelphia, where he strangled 14-year-old Alexander Ozaki. He then committed a series of robberies and murdered another man in Baltimore before being arrested in Washington, D.C. While awaiting trial, Carl openly shared details of his crimes, especially the murders of children, with anyone who would listen. When guards investigated and cross-checked his claims, his multiple aliases and crimes came to light. During this time, a 26-year-old guard, Henry Lesser, showed him some kindness, and Carl considered him a friend. Lesser encouraged Carl to write about his life and crimes, giving him a pencil and paper. Carl wrote a detailed autobiography, laying bare his crimes, thoughts, and deep hatred for humanity. In November, during his trial, Carl confessed to all his crimes without hesitation and tried to defend himself. He was quickly found guilty and sentenced to 25 years at Fort Leavenworth, the same prison he'd escaped from years earlier. Upon arrival, he warned Warden T.B. White, "The first man who bothers me, I'll kill." To keep him isolated, the prison assigned him to work alone in the laundry. But a strict laundry foreman, Robert Warnke, kept a close watch on him. On June 20, 1929, Carl committed his final murder. While Warnke sat in a chair, Carl beat him to death with an iron rod. He also tried to attack other inmates who witnessed the murder. Robert Warnke became Carl Panzram's last victim. On April 14, 1930, his trial began. Carl smirked and taunted witnesses in court. The jury took just 45 minutes to sentence him to death. In the months before his execution, Carl refused to appeal or accept help from human rights activists. He wrote to President Herbert Hoover, insisting he didn't want his sentence reduced. On September 5, 1930, at 5:55 a.m., guards led Carl from his cell to the gallows. Only a few guards and reporters were present. As the executioner placed a black hood over his head, Carl allegedly spat in his face. When asked for his last words, he said, "Hurry up, you Hoosier bastard, I could kill 10 men while you're fooling around." Hoosier bastard was an insult aimed at the executioner, referencing people from Indiana. Even in his final moments, Carl was filled with hatred and defiance. At 6:03 a.m., Carl Panzram was hanged. He dropped 1.5 meters, writhing as his neck snapped. By 6:18 a.m., he was officially declared dead at age 39. No one claimed his body, so he was buried in Fort Leavenworth Cemetery, in the 6th row, grave number 24. His tombstone bears only his prisoner number, 31,614, no name, no message. Carl Panzram's story offers a glimpse into a man who spread nothing but hatred. But it raises the question, are such people born this way, or do circumstances make them so? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's all for today's story. I'll be back with another one next time. Until then, take care. Goodbye.